Well, welcome back. Today, I am going to be continuing the conversation that I began in the prior session, where I talked about the aesthetics, physical aesthetics of modern women, and why modern women have for some reason settled for a physical size that is very, very different to our forefathers and our grandmothers and the prior generations. Now, again, a controversial topic, but one worthy of some attention and some perspective. In today's session, I think the idea that I will focus on primarily will be on providing a benchmark and something to aspire to. Most of the advice I provide on relationships, you could argue, can be applied to either sex. It's not necessarily gender specific, although with the process of inversion, you can apply the same principles to either side of the conversation. So my focused idea today will be on providing women with somewhat of a benchmark, a goal, something to shoot for. But before I begin with such a position, let me pick up from where I stopped in the prior session, where I started to explain the chain link connection between choices, consequences, constraints, and trade-offs. Now, I explained prior to that generally speaking, women who are heavy-set women, large, overweight, obese, position themselves in a very strategic disadvantage in the sexual marketplace. Now, when I talk about the sexual marketplace, I'm talking about two separate marketplaces. There is the dating marketplace and there is the marriage marketplace. In both marketplaces, those who are slightly less desirable, unfortunately, have to compensate. It's called the compensation principle. I said in the prior session, and I believe this to be generally true, the men are visual. We see you first on the outside before we get to know what's on the inside. If you place yourself at a strategic disadvantage of being heavyset, overweight, large, obese, BBW, choose whatever pronouns and adjective you choose to use, or euphemism, to distract you from the reality, the downside is that you position yourself at the same time to be only able to attract what I call men at the bottom of the barrel. So let me qualify that statement as follows. Generally, men are with women that they can afford financially. And by afford, I'm not referring to a purchase. I'm referring to the ability to attract and keep a woman, generally speaking. The woman a man is with is a reflection on what he can afford, both in relation to his resources, wealth, money, power, influence, fame, and education. The more educated a man is, the wealthier a man is, the more accomplished a man is, the more fame a man has, the more influence a man has, the higher the caliber of woman he can attract and keep. In many ways, beauty has a scale ratio. The more the man has in all of those areas of influence, the higher he can attract. So men who have money, power, influence, fame, education, generally have access to the most attractive women. Not necessarily the most educated women, but the most attractive women, because it's a trade-off. Women, on the other hand, are with men that they're able to attract and keep. Attract with their beauty and keep with their attitude. But a man gets to see you first before he gets to understand you. And therefore, the criteria across the sexual marketplace, unfortunately, is your aesthetics, is beauty, is youth, is attractiveness, and in the area of attractiveness, your weight comes into play. You've heard me talk about your height to weight ratio, and similarly, you've also heard me talk about your height to waist ratio. And this is where I come into today's, I guess, major idea. Most people tend to use dress size as a method of qualifying whether they are overweight or in the right weight. I have a different perspective on that. I think your dress size is very, very wrong, a metric to use to understand where you are in the scale of attractiveness. And there are many reasons for that. In the prior session, I talked about what I consider to be a sad reality when it comes to marketing to women. I mentioned that if you go back to the 1980s, 1970s, and 1960s, most men said in the United Kingdom, in England, that a dress size 8 was considered what they found attractive on average between a dress size 8 and a dress size 10. Today, if you go around and ask most men, that number has increased slightly, but that is not the issue. The issue is that a dress size 8 in the 1970s and 1980s has been rebranded. In today's size methodology, what used to be a dress size 8 has now been rebranded as a dress size 4 or a dress size 6. A dress size 14 in the 1980s and 1990s today has changed. So what would have been a dress size 14 then, today, is a dress size 10. And so part of that is simply because retailers are trying to sell products to women. The best way to do that is simply to, what I call, debase the sizes, making people feel good by telling them that they're a size that they are not. Very sad. Unfortunately, this happens to one specific gender. Generally speaking, this is not done amongst men. It's done more amongst women because women are more of the consumers. And it's quite easy with clever advertising. Retailers can sell products to women that they will not get by selling them to men. Now, when I walk into a shop and I put on a jacket or a shirt, I know very instantly whether the sizing is off, whether it's been debased. In any case, I know my size. Since I was 18 until today, my size has stayed around a very narrow margin. And therefore, when I try a different clothing, I know very instantly whether it's been debased. Unfortunately, most women today are going based on sizes indicated on clothes. And I think that is the wrong way to benchmark yourself. So here is what I think perhaps is a very useful guiding principle. Most people will struggle with what I'm about to share, but I think if you accept it and if you use it as a benchmark, you will find that it will serve you very, very well. In the latter sessions that will follow, I will try and explain how my knowledge of the human physique has developed over time. But suffice it to say that I have been involved from a very young age in health and well-being, but more specifically in competing at different levels. I've been a former national bodybuilding champion in the men's classic physique. So I understand the human physique very, very well because I've been part of that process, both competing on a national level and competing on an international level. So some of the knowledge I'm sharing is not simply my opinion. You would find that most people who are professionals in the same genre will perhaps affirm what I'm about to share. Now, this is my own formula, something I've used in the sexual marketplace when I was dating, something I still use today. I'm going to share the formula for both men and women so you can understand how it works and you can see the interrelationship between both sexes. In relation to your height and your weight, the formula is as follows. In kilograms, your weight should be equal to, again, let me take a step back and make it clear. For the woman, to understand what you should weigh, we begin with your height. Your height gives you an indication, a very clear indication of what your weight range should be. In other words, if you want to understand what you should weigh, you need not look to personal trainers, you need not look to image consultants, styling consultants. You don't have to look at bodybuilding coaches. Just simply look at your height. So, for example, if your height is 5'5", 5'5", your weight should be in kilograms, 55 kilograms. And let me say that again, because it's very simple to remember. Again, this is not a complicated formula. This is something I've always used. I've never heard this from anyone before. Your height, assuming you are 5'5". To understand what should be your target weight, you simply convert the same number, 5'5", kilograms. So your height is equal to your weight. Someone who is 5'5" should weigh 55 kilograms. That's your target weight. However, I put a variation to that formula to account for people who are taller and people who are shorter. And the variation of the formula is as follows. If you weigh 5'5", your weight should be the same as your height in kilograms. If you're 5'5" and above, assuming you're 5'6" or 5'7", it should be simply your height in kilograms plus 3 kg. The 3 kilograms is a buffer that we provide, or that I provide, to allow for some tolerance. And let me explain why. If you go back to the 1960s, the 1970s, the average female breast size was a C cup. So in the weight formula I've provided, I have made allowances for the average. What should be the average breast size? Now, I know today that the average breast size for most women is a D or double D and above. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we have become much, much larger. Therefore, the 3 kilograms I provide as a buffer allows for people who are a D cup size and above. It gives you enough of a tolerance, which is your height equals your weight, and you have an extra 3 kilograms to account for any additional weight you might be carrying. But the key thing is that the taller you are, the more tolerance you can have in relation to your weight. Now, I should also state, if you're 5'9", your weight should be 59 kilograms. The buffer should be 3 kilograms. So 59 plus 3 allows you to go up to about 62. Your target weight should be 59 kilograms. The tolerance should be up to 62 kilograms. The taller you are, the easier it is to carry excess weight. As a matter of fact, two people can weigh the same, but look very different. The taller the person is, the more is acceptable to be slightly, to carry more excess weight. Now, I talked about 5'5", being the threshold. And why have I started with 5'5"? Well, the reason is simply this. In the UK, In the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, men were polled and asked a simple question: what is your ideal height in a woman? The answer was 5'5". Today, over the last 4 years, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, the poll is done every single year, and men are asked the same question: what is your ideal height in a woman? The answer, 5'5". So as a society, 5'5" has been generally accepted as the most attractive height in a woman. Interestingly, the same question was asked to women, and they said 5'9" for a man. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. 5'9" was what women felt was attractive in a man in terms of ideal height. As of 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022, the ideal height is 5'9" up to 5'10" for men. This is what women say they actually find attractive. Now, what this means is that people have preferences. If you're 6 foot, it simply means, although you are 6 foot, you are not necessarily, when scored on the average or on the aggregate, women prefer men who are slightly shorter than you are. Now, let's go back to the formula that I provided. If you want to understand your ideal weight, simply look at your height. If you're 5'5", then your ideal weight should be 55 kilograms. I provided the tolerance for people who are 5'5" and above. Again, 5'5", you stay the same as your height in weight. If you're 5'5" and above, in other words, you're 5'6", 5'7", 5'8", 6 foot, 6'1", then we take your height in kilograms and we add 3 kilograms as a buffer. Generally, if you're in the 5 foot range, that 3 kilograms will provide you with roughly about 5% of a buffer. That allows for several things. You're larger than a cup-sized C. You have big buttocks. So you have a tolerance. However, generally speaking, take your height in numbers and just replace what would have been the measuring criteria in height and replace it with kilograms. 5'5" is 55 kilograms. Now, for those who are 5'5" and below, so 5'4", your ideal weight should simply be your height. However, we make a slight variation. We provide the same 3 kilograms of a tolerance, but we put that as a negative tolerance. In other words, if you're 5'5" and above, you're allowed a positive tolerance, meaning you can actually have an increase in weight by 3 kilograms. If you're 5'5" and below, in other words, 5'4" and below, or any variation of 5'4" and below, your ideal height is 5'4" in this example, less 3 kilograms. In other words, you still have a range, but the maximum you should weigh should be your height. It really makes sense when you think about what I'm trying to say. For those who are 5'5" and below, the shorter you are, the less weight you should carry. The reason being, think about the whole concept of symmetry. Someone who is tall but slightly overweight can carry the overweight much better than someone who is short. I say the same thing to men that I know, and men I meet socially or in the gym. The shorter you are as a man, especially men who are 5'5" and below, you should reduce and minimize the temptation to have large muscles, because it makes you look round. It makes you look like a box. Whereas the taller you are, the more you can afford to have larger muscles. So those who are stocky in height, men, you want to be as slim as possible because it makes you look lean and taller. It's all about aesthetics and symmetry. For women, the same principle applies. The shorter you are, the smaller and narrower you should be. Again, we come to the reference to height to waist ratio. Height to waist ratio. You want it to be much smaller the shorter you are. So let me use examples. Assuming you're 5'3" or 5'2", in this case 5'3", your ideal height should be your ideal weight rather should be your height. So 53 kilograms less 3 kilograms, that's 50 kilograms. So your range of weight should be between 50 and 53 kilograms, with 53 kilograms being the maximum you should weigh. Now this is irrespective of cup size or breast size and size of your buttocks. Most people's breasts is simply fat. Most people's bums is simply fat. I understand people have a desire to look round and, very attractive and sexual or sensual. The truth is, most of what you carry in your body, in your buttocks or in your breasts, is fat. In the same way that most men, we delude ourselves in thinking that we are carrying muscles. Most of the time, we are carrying fat. Very few people have lean muscles. If you want to see lean muscles, you have to go to, in men, you have to go into professional competitors, athletes, bodybuilders, because you could actually see lean muscles. As a matter of fact, in bodybuilding, the elite competitors go through a phase of leaning. They put on so much size ahead of a competition, and as they approach the competition, they try to lean out the muscles and get rid of a lot of the fat and convert some of the fat to muscles to make it lean and aesthetically pleasing. As a matter of fact, and perhaps this is something I will allude to in one of the prior sessions, I was fascinated in bodybuilding for the simple reason is that you're scored based on muscle areas and muscle groups. You're asked to take certain poses, and you're scored based on symmetry, proportion, size, how well it's accentuated, beauty, and this is where the height comes into play. The shorter and stockier you are, the less, all things considered, the less the likelihood that you will be scored very high. Those who are slightly taller, not too tall, because if you're too tall, you're at a disadvantage. But let's use a good example. A male bodybuilder who was competing in, say, the classic men's physique, in this case, not classic, but men's physique, who is 5'2", can have an exceptional body. But if he stood next to another man who was 5'10", and who was very well proportioned, the likelihood that the person who is taller will win is very high. And that is simply because of what we call symmetry and proportion and positioning. Generally speaking, it's more appealing to the eyes. It's like a piece of art as opposed to something that is short and stocky. The same principles apply with women. You have to understand that the shorter you are, the less weight you should carry, the smaller you should be in frame. Now, most people argue that they have a larger frame. In my perspective, and this is obviously one perspective, I always ask people, what do you have to lose? Some of us are so wedded to a belief system, and we never let the truth interrupt that belief system. Even when we recognize that truth or that new perspective could be liberating. So my perspective will simply be, for those of you who think you're big boned, you have a bigger frame, it's genetics, it's your ethnicity, all I can say is, what do you have to lose by trying to see whether you can bring out of you your best self? Now let me end this whole issue with height and weight with a story. There is a story that says that back in the day, a young boy walked up to an artist, and the artist was chipping away on a piece of marble. And he asked the artist, what are you doing? And the artist said that there is an angel in this large piece of marble, and I'm trying to set the angel free. And every day the artist will come back to the same spot and he will keep chipping away. And eventually, on one afternoon or one evening, the young boy came back, and there and behold was the sculpture of David. The artist was Michelangelo. He was trying to reveal the beauty in what was considered a piece of stone that had no value. For those of you who have been to Florence, you've seen the statue of David. For those of you who have been to the Sistine Chapel, you've seen the works of Michelangelo in Rome. An impressive artist. Each and every one of us has a David within. Something beautiful, something worthy of admiration. We've been given this body we have, and in many ways every day we have to chip out on all the excesses. You get to choose what David you want to reveal, whether you want that David to be oversized, overweight, large, or whether you want the David to be ideally attractive. Now, the point of all of this is to say, individually we all get to choose. Now, I did say that I would mention and I would refer to men, and perhaps this is an important time to cross-reference the formula I gave you with men. Generally speaking, men should weigh more than the woman at the same height, all things considered. We are genetically and biologically supposed to be larger than the woman. Now, in several species of the animal kingdom, there are certain species where the woman is larger, and for certain reasons. All of those reasons do not apply to humans or to Homo sapiens. And here are some foundational thoughts on that perspective. In certain animals, both mammals and outside the mammalic kingdom, the male offsprings go out and hunt. They do not stay with the female and the kids. Therefore, what tends to happen is for two specific reasons. Women over time have become large in such specific species. One of the reasons is that the woman has to protect the cubs or protect the infants, especially when the male is not around. And so over time, women developed larger sizes because they needed to be able to fend off anything that was considered to be an adversary. The second reason it was that when the men returned from hunting, the women had to fight amongst themselves to be able to lay or have mate with the males. Those who were larger usually won. Now understand this, that in the animal kingdom is the survival of the fittest. So amongst the female species, they would fight amongst themselves, and the one who dominated was the one who actually got to mate with the male. For that reason, you found that women, the females of the species, became larger. So two reasons. One has to do with protection of the offsprings, and the other has to do with sex. None of those two reasons apply to Homo sapiens or human beings. Women today are not naturally the ones who protect the kids. That role is still left to men. Secondly, women generally today do not use physical violence as a way of competing for men. It's done by other means. So the idea that a woman should weigh more than a man and be larger than a man at the same height, all things remaining equal, is wrong. Generally speaking, the man should simply weigh up to a third more than the woman. So for example, giving the man his formula, we start with the same basis. 5'5". For men who are 5'5", we go through a cascading tolerance range. Now remember what I said for women, but just keep 3 different numbers in mind. 30 kilograms, 20 kilograms, and 15 kilograms. Now let's apply that to the female perspective and the female formula. A man who is 6 foot and above should have the same tolerance as the woman, plus he should weigh 30 kilograms more. So, for example, if you're 6'2", you would weigh, 6'2" is your height, 62 kilograms, plus 30, which takes you to 92 kilograms. But then you also have a tolerance range, just like the woman, 3 kilograms. So you can weigh 92 kilograms plus an extra 3 kilograms as a tolerance. That is for people who are 6 foot and above. For those who are 5'5", all the way up to 6 foot, you would weigh your height in kilograms plus 20 kilograms, not 30, 20, plus that 3 kilogram tolerance. So the only difference is that we're simply substituting, or we're adding rather, an extra 20 kilograms. For those who are 5'5", up to 6 foot, you add an extra 20 kilograms. For men who are 5'5" and below, let's assume you're 54, so you're 5'4", your weight should be 54 kilograms plus 15. That's the difference. In this case, we do not subtract the 3 kilograms. It's a very simple formula to keep in mind. Now, the reason for this is simply because if you go back to what I explained about men who are shorter, extra weight doesn't look that great on men who are shorter. Extra weight can be acceptable in men who are taller. The taller you are, the more you can carry the excess weight. The shorter you are, the more you should avoid the excess weight. In summary, let me bring both sexes into the picture. For a woman, keep it simple. I advise, keep it simple. If there is one thing I want you to remember, forget all the tolerances, the additions and the subtractions. Put that aside and just remember this. Your height in foot and inches, take the number and apply to the end of that number kilograms. If you're 5'5", your ideal weight should be 55 kilograms. If you're 5'6", your ideal weight should be 56 kilograms. An extra buffer of 3 kilograms to accommodate any excess that you might have. If you're 5'4", your weight should be 54 kilograms. But because you're below what I call the average of 5'5", we say, well, ideally you should subtract 3 kilograms. So those who are taller get 3 kilograms, those who are shorter lose 3 kilograms. But both groups have a range of value. For men, it's very simple. Your height, convert that to kilograms. If you're 6 foot and above, you add 30 kilograms. You also have the 3 kilograms as a buffer. If you're 5'5", all the way up to 5'11", it's simply your height in kilograms, and then we add 20 additional kilograms, and you also have the 3 kilograms of a buffer. If you are 5'5" and below as a man, we add 15 kilograms to your height, but this time around, we do not subtract, and we do not add an extra 3 kilograms. So, for men, let's make it more interesting to remember. You're 5'2", you should weigh 52 kilograms plus 15. That is your weight. 52 plus 15, in total 67 kilograms. That's your weight. If you're 5'6" as a man, we say you can weigh 56 kilograms plus 20. Now 56 plus 20 takes you to 76, but we also assign an extra 3 kilograms of a buffer. Now, interestingly, the taller you are, the more that buffer applies. So if you're 5'6", you're not too far off from 5'5". Therefore, the extra 3 kilograms of a buffer is less appealing. Whereas if you're 5'11", that 3 kilograms of a buffer is more appealing because you can carry that extra weight much better than someone who is shorter than you. And for men who are 6 foot and above, 6'4", you can weigh 64 kilograms plus 30. That takes you to 94 kilograms, and then you have a 3 kilograms buffer. Now, I hope that's been useful. The reason I focused on this formula is simply because people need to be given a goal, something to shoot for, something to measure themselves against. In the following sessions, I'll revert back to choices, consequences, constraints, and trade-offs. And I'll try to expand on that slightly further because I think it's important for women to understand how we think as men and what we see. In the dating marketplace, to my shocking position, men will have sex with women who are overweight and who are oversized and obese. I disagree with that position, but everyone gets to choose. And I think it's created a scenario where women believe that because a man has sex with them, that means it's acceptable. I think men should not, or should minimize such interactions. The same way I would say that a man who refuses to work, refuses to educate himself, refuses to become, contributing member of society, a man who wants to be a deadbeat person, women should avoid having sex with such men. You do not reward poor behavior, but men get to choose. But in the dating marketplace, and in what we see in society today, men will have sex with anyone. In the marriage marketplace, men are slightly more selective. So in the sessions to follow, I'll go in slightly more into, I guess, what might seem a little bit more controversial. This will be quite heavy hitting. If you consider yourself a snowflake, someone who is very sensitive, someone who cannot take a man's position on things, someone who is too emotional, I would recommend you avoid the next 2 sessions because I think they would be very, very, very hard to absorb initially. However, the goal at the end of the day is to help. I think women over the last 15 years have done more to harm women by creating a bubble where shame has been removed, discipline has been removed, sacrifice has been removed, and all of such words are considered to be, you might say, triggering words. Unfortunately, in our kingdom as men, we still get to choose. And it's important for women to understand how men think. Now, I hope today's session has been useful.